I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Trent McClellan. Trent is a stand-up comedian, writer, podcaster, actor, and cast member of This Hour Has 22 Minutes. Today, I want to find out from him his process, the process that he goes through in being a stand-up comedian and being on This Hour Has 22 Minutes. I want to find out which one is more difficult for him, too. Join me today in my conversation with Trent McClellan. I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Trent McClellan. Good day, fine sir.
Good day, sir. How are you?
I'm doing wonderfully well. And as soon as I heard your voice right a moment ago, I thought of all the friends I went to, or I met when I went to Acadia University. And the bestest of friends came from Newfoundland.
Really? That's cool.
It's not a lie, and it's not an exaggeration. I've never met, and I'm from Nova Scotia, so it's not like, hey, I heard about those Newfoundland guys over there. I'm from Nova Scotia. We're not a far stretch from one another, but I've never met a Newfoundlander that I haven't liked.
I like that. I like hearing that. I think the thing about Newfoundland, and I'm like, there are people from all walks of life and people who, people can not be nice in any province that you're in, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But
Yep.
I think in general in Newfoundland, people don't take themselves too seriously. Like there's not a lot of pretentiousness. The culture doesn't allow it. You're like, people will just cut you down to size quickly if you start to act or think that you're better than anybody else. So I think that keeps you humble, which when you come in with a certain amount of humility, I think it's easier to kind of connect with people because you're not separating yourself in any way. So
It's absolutely true. And that's what you get to realize with in Maritimers, any country, wherever you're going to find people that if they're humble about their beginnings, humble about where they are, then they're a little bit easier to get along with. I mean, we all have our difficulties, no matter who. Trent, will you do us a favor and give people an idea of what industry you're in and what you're up to nowadays?
Well, I am a comedian, actor, and podcaster and writer, I guess. I've been in this industry and entertainment for, I guess, 17 years now, which is insane to think of that. And currently I'm a stand-up comedian and also a cast member of This Hour's 22 Minutes, which is a CBC show in Canada here. That's a political satire show. So it's jokes combined with sketch comedy as well. So I do that plus some stand-up. And I also have my own podcast called the Generators Podcast. So I juggle those three balls in the air most of the year, or at least half the year. And then, so that's what I do. So I feel very lucky to be able to do what I love for a living and be creative for a living. I know not everyone gets to follow their dream, so to speak, but I feel like I truly am doing what I was meant to do and what I'm supposed to do. So I'm grateful for that every day that I get up and do that.
I was listening to one of your most recent episodes, the one in March 2nd, and I went somewhere recently and I saw, I don't know if it was a 20-foot Christmas tree. And this was just a couple of days ago. And you were mentioned walking around the streets of Halifax, noticing some people with their Christmas decorations still up. And
let it go.
Is there a debate to say some people have a point to keep it up? Is there any point to leaving them up, or okay, March is it's a stretch?
Two things I will say. Number one is I have seen people just change the theme of the tree. So they go from it's a Christmas tree to now it's the St. Patty's Day tree, like legit. In Easter, it's got Easter bonnets on it and ribbons and stuff. So they keep it up year round. I have friends who do that, But the second thing is, and I thought about this after, I think with the last 12 months that we've had, maybe it's a little harder to take the tree down, because that's, some semblance of joy and connectedness and a good season and a good feeling, and taking that down makes the house feel empty and cold and all those things. And I think maybe after the 12 months we've had, it's just harder for people to go like, oh God, it's too much reality outside my door. I don't want to step into reality. I'd just rather stay in this festive time. So this year more than ever, I kind of understand it, to be honest. I kind of understand people not wanting to take it down.
And when I saw this one, it was actually in a hospital we went to the other day for my father-in-law. And I was like, what's the Christmas tree still doing up? And then I thought, actually, it's pretty beautiful. And some people might need that coming into this place in particular.
Yeah, it might be just a little pick me up. I'll tell you what I'm big into now, and I kind of see it as a year-round thing is lights. Like I love
Hmm.
putting Christmas lights up, like indoors, like kind
Hmm.
of just like, just these little white lights. And I'm like, man, I think that should be a year-round thing. I'm sure people do have it as a year-round thing. And I'm like, yeah, why don't I
Mood
start bringing
lights.
that into my life and just, make it a cozy area and making my little studio kind of that way. So I think there might be some lines of lights coming in the near future. It'll just be
Some
me with
validity.
just like beads of lights just here as I kind of separate them as I'm like in a 70s sitcom or something, So, but
I
it'll be all
saw
lights.
the other day we went for a walk and they have now this new thing where I am in Daegu, South Korea. I don't know, maybe we're behind the times. When you wait at a crosswalk, rather than waiting only for the little man to change color, you have right down at your feet a pretty thick line. Whether it's time to go, it's green. And when it's time to stop, it's red. It's just a big beam right across where your feet are. So people are looking down, not always looking up. I thought that was a pretty good idea. More lights do us good, I think.
I think you're right, especially in this era of cell phones with people not looking up and are looking
That's
down at their phones
probably
the
a big
entire
reason
time.
why. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I need to remind you that there is a car coming. So let's put this stuff right off the sides of your phone as you look down. So probably a safety feature that is well warranted, I would imagine. So
Trent, will you do us a favor and bring us back? What would have been your very first job, maybe as a teenager, preteen, if it was selling lemonade or some legit job at 13 or 14? What was your very first gig?
my first ever job was I love soccer
Hmm.
playing soccer when I was a kid, and when I was about probably 12 years old, they needed coaches for kids that were like ages 6 and 7 and younger. And so kids my age could apply to be those coaches. So I applied. I remember writing my resume out on a piece of like loose leaf paper, and like, okay, what's our address? Okay, writing it down and handing in this piece of loose leaf paper and getting the job. And it was a big deal. It was like the
Yeah.
first time ever in my life that I had a check with my name, that I'd earned this money. It wasn't just someone giving it to me, it was me earning it. And it meant a lot to me at the time, whatever I was making, probably like, $25 or something or whatever it would have been. But it was a big deal at the time. And I remember, showing up on time, trying to come prepared. So I learned all that kind of early, but I loved that job because I love soccer. So just being around the pitch for me was just so much fun. So that was the first one I ever had.
And you were no slouch in soccer. You played what, under 16, under 17. You were the captain of MUN as well.
Yep. Yeah, I loved it. I got so much out of it. You know, I think growing up, soccer was a metaphor for like me taking control of certain things in my life. My grandparents raised me, and so my childhood wasn't a traditional childhood. But I remember like just pouring myself into soccer, like just going out on a soccer pitch or this dirt road next to my house and hammering this soccer ball off the wall. And I was just like, if I can get this ball to do what I want it to do, it's like that's me somehow controlling all these moving parts of my life. So I would just get lost in playing soccer for hours and hours and hours. And then I was lucky enough to make provincial teams and then play in university and be the captain of my university team. So it was a great gateway for me. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. So my first time ever on a plane to go to the Atlantic Championships was due to soccer, getting on a
Hmm.
plane and how does this seatbelt work? And oh my God, like all this access I was granted because
Yeah.
I was decent at soccer. So I owe a lot to that game. It was my first job.
Hmm.
So that sport gave me a lot for sure.
As you went up through middle school and high school, did you continue working with soccer in particular, or were there some other jobs that are notable?
No, yeah, I stayed with the soccer thing every summer for the most part. I would coach at some capacity. And then I got to probably my first year university, maybe came home for the summer. And then I was the technical director of one of the minor soccer associations in my city. So that was a big job kind of coordinating other coaches and programs and stuff. So that was a real big job for me at the time. And I remember having a lot of responsibility with that. And then also trying to juggle my own soccer playing and training. And so I had a lot going on that summer, I do recall, but it was great because the great thing about coaching too as a job is that you never stop evolving. There's always new drills to learn. The game changes.
Mhm.
You see how other coaches prepare their team or how they set up practice or how they manage a game. And so you can always take in data. And so as a soccer junkie, I was like a sponge, just taking in all this data all the time. So I always felt like there was more to learn. It never got
Mm.
stale. There was always more more drills to learn, and more ways to set up a team and more tactics to learn. So I was always enthralled with it from the get go.
Being a graduate of Memorial University, what were you thinking in high school? Why did you want to go on to further education? What were you thinking about your career at that time?
It's so funny because I don't know what it was like for you, but when I was in high school, you know, this is pre-internet, man, your career options were pretty much what your guidance counselor could offer you. You know,
And
like
I didn't even go
I
to
grew up.
my guidance counselor, so I didn't. Mine looked pretty glib.
You have that. We had like a guidance counselor, and he was great, hilarious guy and fun. But it was like, you know, the options are you can work in the mill in my hometown. You know, it was a pulp and paper mill, and a lot of folks were hoping to get on there because it paid really well. And I was like, well, that's not me. Another option was like, you know, you go to like technical college and learn a trade or something. And I was like, well, I'm not very handy, and I don't really. And then it was like the military. Do you want to join the military? I'm like, I don't want to get shot at. So then it was like, well, your marks are sufficient enough for you to go to university. What do you think? And I was like, well, a bunch of my friends are going, so I'll try that. And that was pretty much the amount of thought I'd put into it. I had no inkling of career or what I was going to be. I was like, I already felt like grade 12 just kind of dropped me off, you know, like I was in this bubble of living. Oh man, every day is great. Basketball, soccer, hanging with my friends. And suddenly it was like, what? Where's everybody? Where's everybody going? It's like you're the last guy at the party, you know.
You feel there's a push behind you. Who's pushing me out of my house? What's going on?
Where's everybody going? I thought we were partying. What's going? You're that guy. So I was that guy. I kind of lost following the crowd a little bit, and luckily there was still soccer to play, so that kind of kept me connected and felt engaged to a certain degree. But yeah, that was my road to university.
What did you take in MUN?
I did a double major. Yeah, I did a double major in history and English because I really did enjoy English in high school. I liked I enjoyed reading, and I liked, you know, writing papers about that stuff and finding a theme and a thesis and stuff. And then in university, I started to take a bunch of history courses, and I found that really, really interesting as well. So then I was like, okay, well, these are the things that also they tended to be my best marks. So I was like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. No idea what I'm supposed to do with that degree or what you do with this as a major. People were like, you're going to be a teacher. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I've coached kids my whole life, and you know, and but that was it. That was kind of the road there.
As you started to near graduation, though, did things start to crystallize, or were you still wandering about? And don't get me wrong, I'm still wandering about in my 40s, and
No.
I did that whole path, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, I still don't know what I want to do.
Yeah, no, I was the same way, man. I was like, what am I supposed to do? And I don't know if you felt this pressure, but a lot of my friends knew what they wanted to do. So they were like, I'm going to be an engineer. They went in, did their engineering program, got a job placement straight out. I was like, wow, I'm not that guy. So what am I supposed to do? So I felt really lost for a while. And then when I graduated from university, also keep in mind as well, Newfoundland at the time, very, very high unemployment. Like it was just like people had master's degrees and they were applying for jobs at the mall, like for customer service jobs at the Gap, because it was just so bad. And so I ended up got a job as a waiter for a year. I was just serving tables, and I hated that. I was just like, I don't see the joy in this at all. If you do a good job, that's what they expect. If their food is cold or the order is messed up, then you're the face of the restaurant and they want to take it out on you.
Good point. If you do a good job, that's what they expect. So don't expect anything in return.
Way to go. You brought the food we ordered. Well done. You're like, okay, but if I don't bring it, you're angry, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I got a job working at the Boys and Girls Club as a kind of a recreation director at Boys and Girls Club. So with my coaching background, they were looking for someone to work with youth there. And I did that. And then I was in that field for almost a decade. I worked at Boys and Girls Club for a couple of years. Then I worked at a community center in Newfoundland for a few years. And then I moved to Calgary, and I worked at Boys and Girls Club in Calgary as well, out of Newfoundland. So I was in that field for quite a while, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I still deep down knew, I don't know if this is what I'm ultimately supposed to be doing with my life, but I did enjoy it, and I enjoyed the kids that I worked with, and I enjoyed this crew that I worked with. But I kind of just drifted into that field.
So knowing your roles now, how did you step into comedy? Was that even a part of growing up as well, or was it just off a whim?
Yeah, comedy for me, I think, was a defense mechanism. In all honesty, it was like, you're a black kid growing up in an all-white town. For most intents and purposes, it was like I didn't see anyone who looked like me. My
Mm.
grandparents were white; they raised me, so I always felt different on the outside. So a way for me to take control of situations where I might be the focus of attention in a negative way was to be funny. It was just like
Mhm.
you change the power dynamic in that moment. So I always had a pretty keen sense of humor. And I had a lot of friends who were like, oh, you should do comedy, you should do stand up. But in Newfoundland at that time in the 80s and 90s, there was no comedy scene. There were no comedy clubs.
Mm.
It was just something on my television, like I didn't have access to talk to comedians. And I got to go to one or two shows that came through the city, but I never ever got to speak to a real comedian or learn about how to do it. But when I finally graduated from university and I had those jobs working with kids, I decided to move to Calgary because the economy had dried up, really badly in Newfoundland. And when I chose Calgary, I knew they had comedy clubs there. And I said, if I move there, I'm going to go to an amateur night and just try it. I'm going to go on stage and just see if I can make
Were
strangers
you
laugh for
writing?
5 minutes.
Did you write at
Yeah,
all before this?
yeah. So,
Yeah, you did.
yeah. So when you went to a Yuck Yucks, I think it was in Calgary at the time, it was a Yuck Yucks. They had what they called amateur night, where you could go for an hour ahead of time, and they had a headline comedian who would talk to you about the business. So there'd be a group of people, all newbies, and they would tell you about, how to write a joke structure, how the business works. Some of them were really good at doing that. Others were kind of just grizzled guys who were like, most of you won't be here in a month. You don't have what it takes. You don't,
Mhm.
you're like, oh, so there was a bit of that. And I was just the same thing, like as I was with soccer. I was just a sponge. I just took it all in.
Mhm.
I could not get enough of it. I was reading books about stand up. I was totally enthralled. And then I went on stage for the first time, and I swear to you, everything in that moment made sense. As soon as I got off stage, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. Everything else now makes sense. Why other things didn't work out, why I wasn't completely fulfilled in other things.
Mhm.
It's because I hadn't found this thing, and now I know why, and I knew.
How many minutes did you do your first time up?
I think they let you do 5 to 7 minutes, and I tell people, man, that walk when you're in the wings at a comedy club in the dark and they're about to announce you, and the host goes, all right, this next guy, it's his first time ever on stage. I mean, my knees were literally quivering, like for real quivering. And I remember thinking, can I make it to the microphone? Like, will I be able to physically move my legs left, right to get to this mic? And I was fortunate enough to get to the mic, got a laugh early, and then my confidence kind of grew a
Mhm.
little bit. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, what about this next one? And that got a laugh, and I was off to the races. I was hooked. It's like a drug you can't get enough of or something. It was just so addictive to get that kind of adulation and to connect with strangers like that.
From out of the gates and off to the races, how long was it before you got your first prize of some sort?
Prize?
Of
Okay,
some sort. Maybe
I went,
a dollar or something. You're like, what? I'm getting something in return for this race.
yeah. So what I continued to do was I would work at Boys and Girls Club Monday to Friday, and then on the weekends, the booker in Calgary would send me off on the road to go open for bigger acts.
Mhm.
Probably after a few months, this started to happen. So I'd go to like small town Alberta or somewhere in Saskatchewan at a Legion or a community center, and I'm like, I'm doing 20 minutes, and it would cost me more in gas money to get there than what I was getting paid. But I was like, I'm making money doing
Yeah.
stand up,
Yeah.
And I'd come back on Sunday. I'd go back to my job again Monday at the Boys and Girls Club, and I remember the story. I was playing some small town, and I was opening for somebody else in Alberta. It's a Saturday night, and once we got off stage, because it was such a small town, he's like, as a comedian coming through, it was a big deal for a lot of the folks that were in the
Mhm.
town, right? They didn't know who you were, but they just knew you were one of the comedians and you were
Mhm.
funny, and like, oh my god. So we get off stage, myself and two other comedians, and so people come up and they want autographs, right? They don't even know our names really, but they're just like, hey man, would you sign my thing and sign this or whatever? So we're signing stuff. And I'm like, my God, wow, this is amazing. We're just on a cloud. We're driving back to Calgary.
Wait till I
So
tell
that's
the kids
Sun.
on Monday.
Yeah. So Monday I get into work, and I'm feeling like I'm on a high. I'm like, man, maybe, it's time for me to start thinking about, moving on and doing stand up full time. And I get into work and one of my staff goes, Trent, the boys' toilet's clogged. Can you go fix it? And they just hand me a plunger. And I was like, I was signing autographs on the weekend.
Do you know who I am?
Autographs. I don't need to be here with a plunger. And I've been walking into the boys' room like this. So that was the first crack in the foundation of like, all right, it's time to start considering moving on to something else.
But no matter how famous you get, I even heard one of your skits talking about, whether it's the clog in the tub or it doesn't matter in the toilet or not. One day it doesn't matter how big you are because of female. You're gonna have to unclog it.
Unclog something. That's life, isn't it? It's a metaphor for life. I'm always unclogging something. So, but I did it for about 3 years. I did that kind of cycle of work during the week, gig on the weekend, work during the week. I did that for 3 years. And then eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to leap in to stand up full time after 3 years and go for it.
It seems like a bit of a cliche what I'm going to ask, but I think you'll know what I mean. But I think as a comedian, you have all this work that you're putting into it that people don't see. But where was your big break? When did you break through? And it's not like it was like dun 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 dun. It might have been, but all of that work behind what people don't see, like, oh, but when did you break through?
Yeah.
When was your big break?
I think a big break for me, and I don't know where this came from. It was more of a mindset, I would say. And the mindset was, this is a job. This is not a party. This is not, hey, a great way to meet girls. This is a job. And like all jobs, you have to work, put an effort in, be professional. And I quickly learned that talent wasn't enough. Like there's lots of folks who are funny and, very, very talented, but didn't mean they went on to have long, successful, healthy careers because they had other things, whether it was drinking or gambling or drugs or whatever it was. They just couldn't stay focused enough to just keep doing this thing and keep creating. And I learned that early somehow. I mean, I did my share of partying too, I'm sure, when I first started, and was enjoying myself too. But I feel like I realized quickly, like if you want to have success in this business, you're going to have to put in an effort and really, really dig in. And I learned that early. The other thing I would say that really helped me was I was able to work fairly clean material wise. So that allowed me to do corporate comedy, which was where companies would hire you for their holiday party or whatever. And that put a lot of money in my pocket. So I treated that almost like my new day job. I'll do corporate comedy where I kind of have to play by a stricter set of rules and be squeaky clean, but at least I'm still doing stand up. At least it's forcing me to kind of write in a certain way. And then on the weekends when I'm doing other club gigs, I can say whatever I want and I'm not censored. But those two things really, really helped me because they allow me to put enough money in my pocket to kind of keep funding the dream and funding the dream. So I think those two things were really, 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 really huge for me to be able to keep my legs moving.
I watched maybe you've seen it too, but the Netflix of Jerry Seinfeld and one of his older times is showing when he first started, and Orny Adams was in it as well. And
that movie changed my life.
What I didn't realize is he spread out all of his work from a certain amount of time on one of the roads or something, all the pieces of paper. And even Orny Adams had a filing cabinet full of stuff, just material that he's been working on. How is that for you and that writing process and, keep crafting your skills?
Yeah, well, that movie, I'd watched that documentary about, Seinfeld and Orny and people writing their material. I watched that movie before I ever went on stage. So that gave me permission to try it. Cause I was like, before that, I thought anything professional comedians say on stage is like, oh, they just have these brilliant thoughts and they walk up on stage and say them, or it comes off the top of their head. I didn't realize it took that much work and effort to craft and act. So I went, well, I have ideas. So what do you guys do? Just go up and see if it works. And maybe sometimes it doesn't. I'm like, well, I can do that. That's what I'm starting now. I just have ideas. So that showed me the behind the curtain of what it took to be a stand-up in the process. So that was so crucial for me. And then I was like, okay, well, I need to write every day then. I need to put work into this every single day, spend time. Either I would go to a Starbucks or a coffee shop and I would sit there and just try and write a few jokes every single day, or go back and look at jokes that I was already doing and see if I could improve them or add to them. And, I drive by Starbucks in Calgary now. I can still go, I wrote my first act in that Starbucks, over the course of a bunch of months, I would have written my full act in there. observing people, overhearing conversations, you get inspired to write something. And that's where the work ethic comes in. And it's funny you brought that up, because in that movie, Jerry Seinfeld actually says it's about sitting your ass down in the chair and doing the work for a lot of comedians, or getting on stage. And he said he remembers looking out the window at a bunch of construction
The
workers
construction
walking down the road.
guys, right?
And he
They
goes,
don't
they
want
don't
to
want
go
to go
back to
to
work.
work after lunch, but they go.
They go.
And he goes, I don't care if you're in the mood to write jokes, sit down and write them. And he goes, that I think that work ethic too was instilled in me just in watching that movie, and then seeing other successful comedians and how they plied their trade, and the work, like you said, they put in off stage in the dark. It's like an athlete, right? Like Sidney Crosby wins Stanley Cups and gold medals, but what you don't see is training, the dry land training in summer with a parachute tied to his back, running up a sand dune. You just see him lifting the cup like, yeah, I'm the greatest. It's like, yeah, but it's hours and hours and hours of work and effort in the dark that nobody sees. So I think anyone to be successful at a high level, I think it takes a lot of that.
That what he said and what you're reiterating is very important for anyone in any industry, because I was thinking of it yesterday. I was feeling a little glum, and I went for a walk, and I just looked at people like, that person does not necessarily want to be doing their job right now, but they're doing it, right? They have to put their feet on the floor and get up and get going. And a lot of people feel that way, but as I think it's an encouragement to see other people putting in the grind, putting in the time, putting in the effort, refining, going back. And even if you don't want to, getting up, whatever, putting a parachute on your back, all of those things are ways to encourage one another and show that this work that we're doing is paying off. Whatever your goals and dreams may be, they're valid in each individual's life.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, it's very well put. And a motto that I've kind of adopted too is that you will be measured at some point. Like I get athletes don't want to train every day, and I get comedians don't want to put work in every day, but at some point you will be measured. You will be at a show. There'll be high stakes. It'll be for a showcase or an audition, or you've got a big audience, or you've got a tour that you sold tickets to, and now there's 1,000 people out there waiting to see you. Like, you're about to be measured. And in that moment, you'll have to ask yourself, have I done the preparation and the work, or have I not? And there's nowhere to hide in that moment. That's the thing about stand-up. It's such a solitary endeavor. There is no one to lean on in that moment. You either have got the material or you do not. And nobody cares. They paid their money and they're like, go. And so I always think about that, like the next tour, the next big show I have, like, will I be ready for it? And it might not be for months, but it's like, well, can you prepare now? And there's always something you can do to get better, So that's kind of the way I approach it, is to that when it's time to get measured, will I be ready? And hopefully I can answer yes.
Well, it's how you mentioned the waiter or waitress bringing the food. Did you do your job? Good. You were supposed to. and the grind or the difficulty in being a comedian, I think, is up there with any of the top. I mean, any job has difficulty, and it brings stress and difficulties to each people based on what they can handle. But being a comedian, I think, is at least somewhere pushing the top, because you have to be funny.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
And
not
that's a
enough
lot
just
of
to public
pressure.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just enough to public speak. It's like, okay, well, a lot of folks in public speak, but it's like, I need to actually get a physical reaction out of these people. Like, I'm not there just hoping that they listen. I'm like, no, I need you to laugh at the end of what I'm saying. And like it's a different thing. I know it sounds silly once stated, but it's true.
Oh, like, but it's funny, right? It's like, okay, listen, I'm going to say some things to you today, and at the end of it, laugh.
I need you to laugh. Yeah, that's the whole goal. And it's funny because my days playing soccer and stuff helped me a lot, because there's a lot of parallels I've found, like even in my own podcast, talking to athletes and other comedians, is that when you're an athlete, game time is 8:00 or whatever time it is. The opposition doesn't care if you slept well. They don't care if you have food poisoning. They don't care if you don't feel great. They don't care if you had a bad travel day. They're going to beat the crap out of you when you show up. And the same thing with an audience. It's like, if I haven't had a good day, I haven't slept well, a hotel, I couldn't sleep, I have food, nobody cares. 8:00, it's like, I paid my money, make me laugh. So that same mentality, yeah, exactly. It's like you have to show up and be professional and do the job. I mean, there's been times I've gone on stage where I did not feel good. I was tired. I whatever, a million different things that happen to someone in a lifetime, but you have to be able to flick that switch at showtime and deliver. And, it's like we talked about earlier, easy to do things when you're in the mood to do it. can you do it when you're not in the mood to do it?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what separates, in the comedy world anyway, often people say that's what separates the amateurs from the pros, is the pros will flick that switch and do it and deliver when they need to, and amateurs are like, when I'm in the mood and when I'm feeling it and when the crowd's kind of into me, and then it's like, yeah, when you're going downhill, it's easy. When you got to go uphill, not so easy. So you learn that from doing lots of different gigs with lots of different audiences at various different times of day, and crowds that have not drank any alcohol, crowds that have drank too much alcohol, and you learn to just be able to deliver and figure out a way to connect with that audience. Not to say you don't have shows that don't work, because every comedian will have those too, but you learn over time more tools in your belt to use, with different scenarios. But it's not always about motivation. It's like, can you just have the discipline to be able to deliver in this moment? So I learned a lot of that from sports, I think.
Trent, what was the transition like for you from being a stand-up comedian into This Hour Has 22 Minutes? And how much different is that from just being on stage all on your own with just you're being responsible for yourself?
Right. Yeah. No, it's a big change. It's kind of a 180, because we're part of a team. When you're with 22, there's, your fellow castmates, there's a bunch of writers, you have directors, executive producers, people who do set design, wardrobe, makeup. Like, it's a full team, and a kind of a collective wisdom to kind of see this vision come to life. Stand up is very, autocratic. It's like, I get to say it the way I want to say it every single time. I get to pick the topics. And on 22, I guess I do get to have input and get to write things and stuff, but there's so many more hands on it, right? And so it's got to be okay with the network in terms of what language we can use and those different things. So you're always kind of in a bit of a framework that you didn't necessarily create. Whereas with stand-up, it's complete freedom to say and do whatever you want, as long as it's funny, as long as you deem it to be funny. And if you can get an audience to laugh, it's all okay. So it's a bit of an adjustment there mentally, for sure, because you're different. It's a different approach. Also, the great thing about stand-up is that you can write something. This happened to me just the other day. My girlfriend and I were joking around about a topic, and I said, I'm going to go to the club tonight. I'm going to try that. And she's like, okay. So I go to the club. She comes with me, and I try it, and it works. So right away, I had an idea at 5 o'clock. 3 hours later, I'm on stage saying that thing, and a bunch of strangers I've never met are now laughing at it. So the feedback is immediate. I know immediately what's working. With TV, you make something last week, it's not going to air till the following week. In between those two things, we've already made 100 things. We've already moved on to make more sketches and write more jokes and whatever. So you don't get to see the reaction of it per se, because people are home in their living room and watching it, or you'll see online maybe like if something's doing well or it's going viral or whatever. But stand-up to me is cool because it's just that immediate. I have a thought, this idea, take it to stage and see if it works. And the audience will tell you right then and there in the moment. So they're very, very different beasts, for sure, between stand-up and sketch like that.
Between the two, which one brings you the most difficulty, and what are those difficulties, and which brings you the most satisfaction, and what is that satisfaction?
Yeah, I think both come with their challenges. Stand-up, again, because I've said this to musicians that I've had on my podcast, like people who have been in bands. Part of me wishes I'd kind of been in a group like that, whether it's a comedy group or a music group or whatever, because you have that camaraderie of traveling around. You're not alone. Stand-up comedians often are just traveling alone, in hotels alone, eating alone. You do the show alone. You're alone again. It's a lot of isolation, So that's a downside of stand-up.
Isn't that ironic? Being alone, but you have to be funny to a bunch of people.
Yeah, well, it's a great quote actually from Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up. I don't know if you've read it or not, but he has a great quote about playing a football stadium, and it was probably, I think, 80,000 people. It's him just on a massive stage wearing this white suit, and he's destroying and killing. The crowd's going crazy. The show ends, he gets in a limo, he goes to a hotel, sits in his hotel room by himself, and he's just eating shrimp cocktail by himself. And like the duality of those two things is like, I just was in the biggest crowd where I was the focal point of all this energy and love. And now I'm sitting by myself with a remote control watching the evening news, and it's just me, like there's those two things that are hard to balance sometimes for comedians. And I think some comedians struggle trying to get away, deal with that. but also creatively, then you have 100% control creatively. You get to do things the way you want to do it. And so there's no compromise. So the great thing about 22 is you love being part of a team. People bring in new ideas. Playing with other actors is fantastic because you're going to get to see where something's going to go and let it come to life in the moment while you're doing a sketch together. But also sometimes when you have an idea and it doesn't make the show for whatever reason, sometimes that can be frustration because you've worked hard on it and you think it would work, but someone else views it like, oh, we just can't do it, we can't shoot it, or we just don't think it would work. So you're always compromising in that regard. So that would be the challenge, I think, with the TV side.
I was talking to Tommy Chung, and he mentioned Steve Martin had quit stand-up comedy because he could not handle making his set, delivering the set, performing, going on stage, and then having to write a new set again. So those peaks and valleys of getting back down in those trenches in those 5 minutes again, this stroke here and trying for, how is that for you? Because what people may not understand, and I obviously don't understand it fully, but you get your set, you got, a good 20, 40, 50 minutes, however much you have. And then when you're done playing that out to all the places you go to, you got to start over again.
Yeah. You gotta rebuild it again. And that's hard for some comedians to do. And it's not easy because you get in certain flow of this material. You feel like you can keep adding on to that material. But the new standard now is like, have that for a year or two and then get rid of it and put a brand new hour of material out. And that's really hard. I find it interesting now. People are talking about Eddie Murphy coming back, to do stand up. And
he seems cool hesitant, right? He was on Jerry Seinfeld, and on that show, Coffee with Comedians in Cars.
And he was in cars drinking coffee.
He just seemed like he was very hesitant to that whole idea.
Yeah, because he knows that because he's a comedian and he's done it before. Before you saw Delirious or Raw, what you don't see is the years of going to comedy clubs and working this material out. So he knows that if he has got to come back and has to try and meet the standard that people have already set for him in their minds as to what he was and that legend and how good he was before, he's got to try and meet that bar. And in order to get to that bar, you got to get clubs, you got to get stage time, you got to be on that stage pretty much every night doing multiple sets, trying to work your material. Like that is work. That is a grind. And that's a danger of television sometimes or movies. It's an easier lifestyle. And so, it's easier to sit back and watch TV and have a good time. And then you want to set the next day. Do you want to do all that? But now when you come home, you got to go do a set at the Comedy Cellar in New York and then go to another place after that, get home at 2 o'clock in the morning, go to sleep, wake up, you're on set now doing your film again. Like it's a grind. It's work to get that polished diamond ready for public consumption for a Netflix special or whatever, because it's going to go out in the world and it will live in infamy forever. So that's a lot of pressure for someone even when you're Eddie Murphy, because the standard is so high and you set that standard for yourself with your past work. So I understand why he'd be hesitant because
you have that pressure.
There's trench work to do. Yeah.
You have that pressure as well. And I heard you mention that you went to Comedy Cove not long ago.
Yep.
And how was that for you to get back, get your sea legs,
Yeah, it was good, but it feels like, you're riding a bike again for the first time, it just, that muscle will atrophy if you don't use it. It's like, you need to be on stage all the time. So now as our 22-minute season is winding down, I'll be doing more stand-up and getting up more and working on more new material. So you eventually just had to get back up and do it. There is no shortcut. That's the thing about it. Like, I think Eddie Murphy's a genius for one, so it may be easier for him than anybody else. But at the end of the day, you still want to be sharp. You still want to deliver when people are paying real good money to come see you and your name's on a poster and they bought tickets months ago. Like you really, really want to deliver. And so that takes repetition. It takes work and writing off stage. So but I enjoy that process. I was lucky that way as a stand-up, but I love the adrenaline of performing, but I also love sitting down with a pen and paper and trying to figure out why a joke doesn't work and how to trying to fix it and then tweaking it and taking it back on stage. Like I love that part too. I love the solitariness of that. So I'm lucky in that way.
Is there a specific skill, thinking back when you were in Calgary and you went up on stage for the first time, and even now after being on stage many times in front of the camera, is there something in particular that helps a comedian be at his or her best? or for
That's a
you in
great question.
particular?
That's a great question. I think a lack of self-consciousness is a great thing to have. I think self-consciousness really puts us handcuffs on everybody, whether you're public speaking, whether you're a leader of a company. Um, can you just be in the moment and deliver this thing and not have the radio going in your head about all these other thoughts that could be negative and draining you? Can you
Hmm.
just be in the moment and focused? And the more you can dial in like that, I think the better you are and the better performance you'll have. But it's when we start worrying about, will this work? Will it not work? What do they think? That will drain confidence and it takes away from performance, I think, at the end of the day. So the great thing about doing stand up for a bunch of years is that self-consciousness tends to go away more and more and more and more. I think you'll always have a level of it, but it really quiets down as you've been doing it for a long time. You just kind of go, nothing's fatal. If this joke works or doesn't work, doesn't matter. I get up again tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like I wake up tomorrow in my own bed. Who cares? Like you don't have as much pressure on yourself to make sure everything's perfect from the get go. You're like, no, I'm willing to try something different, experiment, put new ideas out there, see what I can find. So that lack of self consciousness, I think, is vital for a comedian.
Do you ever bring notes with you or some sort of cues to help you stay on track?
Yeah, sometimes when I'm trying to brand new material, I'll just take like a little notepad up there with me or a little notebook, and I'll have just a set list written down and a few bullet points if I think I'm going to forget it. The great thing too, for me anyway, is that it becomes memory very quickly for me. So
Hmm.
if I can do it once like that or twice like that, then it will quickly be like, okay, well now it's in there and I know it, and I can start adding on to it and putting layers on top of it and new angles and add new lines to it. But sometimes the first time you just, because you're performing in front of a live audience, sometimes stuff can just leave your mind in the moment. And you can look
Hmm.
down quickly and go, okay, I have a reference point. And, but once I'm in the groove and I know my hour or whatever, I don't need any notes at all. It's just locked in there and I can go. So,
Trent, knowing how you said that when you went to school or university, you weren't sure what you were going to take, you did some other, helping out and working in other places, but not until you stood up on that stage, you kind of found that was what you wanted to do for your life. Knowing that people arrive at those points at various stages in their life, do you have any advice for people who are starting their first job, maybe like you were a soccer coach at the age of 12, or changing their career after they're finding something different works for them? Do you have advice for people like that?
yeah, it's funny. I talked to a bunch of student athletes at my former university, Memorial University, and I spoke to them 2 weeks ago on Zoom. And one of the things I said to them was, you do not need to put pressure on yourself that this thing that you choose is now locked and loaded and that's what you got to do for the rest of your life. Like people change careers, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Like that's just the nature of the world we're in right now. But we put so much pressure on kids in particular to know what they want to do at 17, 18 years of
Mhm.
age. Like to me, that's ridiculous. You haven't even experienced the world yet. How are you going to know what you want to do with your life? Like, so I don't think it's realistic for people to feel like they got to pick a lane and stay in that lane. And so I think taste as many things as you can, try things, and realize you can always turn the car around. If you're not happy doing this thing, you can leave it and you can go do something else. But I think we start muddying the waters when we start listening to parents and their opinion, and you go,
Mhm.
oh, well, I spent all this money on my degree, so now I have to stay in this field because I spent all that money in education. Why? And so you can be unhappy and just go, well, I'm going to fulfill this. It's like, do the thing you love. And I think ultimately, and I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but I feel like people deep down, if they quiet all the noise, they know what they want to do. But it's when we let all the other noise in from
Mhm.
the outside, we start convincing ourselves that no, I can't do that thing, or someone else thinks that's not a good idea. Like it's no one else's business. What you want to do with your life, career, if you quiet the noise and listen to yourself, you know what that is. It may take a long time.
Mhm.
I don't know what status you'll get to, what level you get to,
Mhm.
but if you follow that, I feel like the rest of it will come. You'll work way harder because you love it. You will put the effort in because you want to be doing that thing. And I think more people need to listen to that and stop listening to all the outside noise and industry trends and here's who's hiring. It's like I get people have to pay the bills, and I respect anyone who works for a living. I respect anyone who's willing to do any job and does it to the best of their ability. But do the thing you want to do. Do the thing
Mhm.
you want to do, and don't listen to any outside noise.
Yeah, that's what I find about doing this podcast of Why We Work, and just finding people from all sorts of walks doing these and many other things that they do and how they came about doing it. And a lot of the people seem to, it was just something that they kind of knew, it was part of them their whole life, and it just took them a while to get there. And it just, I
Hmm.
think what you're saying is that noise kind of gets in the way, and other pressures, you get married or you have kids, or, this Johnny went to this school and you have to go to this, or, all of those things kind of as you said, muddy up the waters of allowing us to think clearly.
Yeah, I think fear is a chameleon, right? Fear
Mhm.
will mask itself in different ways. We make up stories as to why we can't follow this certain career path. We think our parents are going to get mad. We think our partner won't understand. We are fearful that we don't know how to transition to this next thing. And at the end of the day, the only way you'll ever know is if you try that thing and put your toe in the water and at least, check the temperature of the water over there. I wouldn't know if I could be a stand up or not if I didn't
Mhm.
find the legs and courage to go up on stage the first time. The rest of the time, it would just be wondering if I could ever do it. And what if they don't laugh, and thinking about worst case scenarios. And so I feel like people need to start. Another way I've heard it termed, people say, follow your passion, follow your passion. And another way I've heard it phrased is, think about it less as a passion, think about it more as a curiosity. Follow your curiosity.
Mhm.
And that sometimes is just a whisper. It's just a small thing. It's the
Mhm.
thing you love doing when you're not getting paid, if you just had free time, this is the thing you would do. What is that thing? And can you find a way to make a living doing that thing? And I
Mhm.
think if more folks look to follow their curiosity, I think they'd be a lot happier.
Yeah, I like that, the curiosity, because when someone says follow your passion, I'm like, I don't know if what I'm doing is my passion, but I'd like to find out more about it. And see
Right.
where that
And
takes me. Is it a full-blown passion? I'm not sure. And you think also, if it is my full-blown passion, why aren't I doing better with it? Why am I
right. Yeah. Yeah.
why am I not so skilled with this?
Well, maybe my passion is not going to pay me. But I heard Bill Burr, the great comedian,
Mhm.
American comedian, he said he was giving advice to someone who wanted to try stand up, and they're like, they had a great six-figure job, but they really, really wanted to try stand up, and that was his advice to them was, just go to an open mic, just try it, just go try it for a little bit on the side. Don't quit your day job by any means, but just go try some open mics and see how you feel, and you'll know within that period of time, after a period of months, like, is this something you want to put more energy into? Is it what you thought it was going to be? Like, you'll get all this data back from the experience, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then you can make a decision. But he goes, you got to have that thing, that drive, that, yeah, like at all costs, I will find a way to get this done, because you have that curiosity just pulling you along. But if you don't have that, then that's probably not going to be your thing. So I think you're right. I like that phrase, the terminology of curiosity. I think it's passion to me seems too large and
Mhm.
grand, and we try and, I'm changing the world with my passion, and I think a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? Like, I live in a small town. I don't have, what
We're
do you
from the
mean?
Maritimes. Passion. What are you?
Yeah,
Is that a
I
fruit?
yeah, we don't have a bus system here. What are you talking about? So I mean, it's like, but I think when you say curiosity, I think everyone can
Mhm.
identify
Mhm.
with the curiosity that they have, that they could say, yeah, I wouldn't mind. I've always wanted to learn guitar, so yeah, I think I'm gonna buy a guitar and maybe learn how to play. Like, it's just small, little, gradual increments, that pull you along.
Is there a trend? I think Bill Burr is one of your favorite comedians, and you mentioned your grandparents. Do you have a moral beacon that's kind of guiding you along, or something that you're trying to attain to, or a thing in the back of your mind that kind of pushes you and encourages you?
I really been thinking about this the last couple of years. Actually, I started doing meditation the last probably 6 years, I guess.
Hmm.
I try to incorporate it into every day. Some days I don't get to do it, but I try to do it a bunch of times a week at least. So, excuse me, I like doing that, and I like just quieting my mind a little
Hmm.
bit. And part of that routine as well includes a gratitude practice of just writing down three things every day that I'm grateful for: an interaction, a cup of coffee, whatever it may be, that I can just meditate on and think about how great that was. And I end each meditation normally with, I want to be kind and I want to be creative. I want to be kind and I want to be creative. And like, that is the intent of every single
Hmm.
day. Be kind, be creative. And if I do those things, at the end of the day, I feel happy and I feel authentic. So that's kind of become
Yeah,
my little moral compass: is be kind and be creative.
that's excellent. Do you have a opinion on education in general, but also knowing you're a soccer player, exercise. So education, and more so for the listeners, but wondering what you do and how you keep fit and with your mind and your body. What are your views on those two?
With regards to exercise, I try and work out a couple times a week for sure. So it's, weight training, treadmill stuff, spin bikes and stuff. I try to do that 3 or 4 times a week. And I love that because it just, I'm a real big believer that you can change your state of mind by changing your body, and you can change your body by changing your state of mind. You know that adage? And I feel like you can. So when you're in a bit of a rut mentally, exercise for me will really jog things up for me and allow me to be creative again, or give me a new perspective on a problem or an obstacle. So I really, I'm big on that. And I
Would
know
you
it's a
also,
difference in my,
sorry, would you also
but
say, because I missed exercise last couple of days and I just felt gloomy, right?
yes,
And I think people don't realize, you know, it's easy to be lazy, or it's not even easy to be lazy. You kind of have to work at being lazy as well. But once you
yep,
get in that groove of a few days, of not a week, a month, and you're not doing it, like that's a big part of how you're feeling. Because once you get out and do one little bit of exercise, you're like, oh, well, look at me, I know what I'm doing, and
yeah,
you feel
yeah,
totally different.
yeah,
How do you
I
feel?
agree. And I totally agree. And it gets back to what we said earlier, like about, writing jokes or doing the job, even when you don't want to do it. The trick of that is just sit down and start. Give yourself 5 minutes. Like if you got to do a task and you don't want to do it, just say, look, I'm gonna put 5 minutes into this. And I guarantee you, once you start, you'll put in more than 5 minutes. You'll just start doing it. But it's just the transition from doing nothing to doing something that we see as Mount Everest quite often. And the gym is the same thing. It's like, just get dressed, put your clothes on, and start moving your ass to the gym. And when people do that and you get there, now you're there. You're going to put the work in now that you're there. It's just that transition of getting from A to B. So it's not about, we always wait for motivation and being in the mood. And it's like, it's just not, people can't live that way because you're not always going to be in the mood, but you just got to get into that disciplinary mindset of like, yeah, I look at the clock and I go, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going out that door at 6 o'clock. Doesn't matter if I'm in the mood. I don't care if I'm feeling it. And I never regret it. I go,
Never
I come
regret
back,
it.
and I'm always glad I went every single
Hate
time.
it
So that's
beforehand, but never regret it afterwards.
ever, you never do it. So you realize that. And I know, I can tell myself that too, that I know I'll feel better when I come back. Like I automatically know that. So that also helps me move out the door. Education, I feel, is like, I really think people, I think reading in general too, just as a general educational thing, is just fantastic. I think putting reading in every single day is great, and reading as much as you can is a great thing. Excuse me, I think we're on our phones way too much these days, and social media and likes and whatever. We should be like learning more and reading more and seeing combinations of words together and making our minds think differently. I love reading books about creativity and understanding people's process of making anything, whether it's music or movies or stand-up comedy. I just love the behind the scenes inner workings of process for people and what makes them, how they go about their work. I love that. And for me, university was vital because it taught me how to critically think. It taught me how to not just take things at face value, but question them and dig inside and unlock them and go, why is that? Well, how come that thing happened? Well, maybe it's connected to this. And I really feel like that helped me so much in my comedy career, because that's what comedians do. We ask why. We ask, how come that is that way? It's perspective. It's making an argument. I learned all that in university. So
what is your overarching goal, maybe with your stand-up comedy routine, maybe into acting, maybe with your podcast? What is your overarching goal for you?
I think I want to just continue to be creative and see where that curiosity takes me, to be honest. I feel like I want the podcast to continue to grow and more people to hear it and to continue to have great conversations. For me, the goal with the podcast is just, I realized in my profession, I was getting to have fantastic conversations with people from all different professions.
This is the
And I was like,
Generators, correct? The Generators
the
podcast.
Generators podcast. Yeah. So I've talked to, comedians, musicians, athletes, NHL, former NHL players, coaches, journalists, doctors, and I realized I would like to start capturing these conversations, and sharing them with people, because I always learn so much. I feel like it's selfish in a way, because I always gain so much from the conversation to kind of plug into my own life. But I was like, why don't I start capturing these and putting them out in the world? So we're at I think 75 episodes now and stuff. So I just want to continue to keep doing that, and hopefully more people will find it. Stand-up wise, I want to continue to push myself and grow and continue to create new material all the time, try new things on stage, and really push myself that way, performance wise. And then obviously I'd like to just do some of my own projects as well. And I'd like to write a book at some point. So I think that's going to be in my near future. So it's like, yeah, continuing to be creative in any way. I think that's where I'm happiest, when I'm doing those things. I feel like that's when I'm my authentic self. So I don't have any real tangible goals in terms of like, oh, I got to reach this or I got to reach that. Cause I feel like those things you don't control necessarily. That's the universe and industry and all those things deciding. Whereas if my goals are internal and I focus on the things that I can control, which is just my own effort, my own output, then, I think I will continue to be happy and content with what I'm doing.
Is there anything people may not understand about you, or maybe even comedy in particular, that if they understood this about you or comedy, they would have a better appreciation for you or the art of comedy?
I think the big thing about comedy, I feel like people don't understand, is that it's such a vulnerable thing to stand up on a stage and, say, hey, I'm going to try and entertain these people. And like I said, you can be moving anywhere from 10 people one night to 1,500 people the next night. I mean, it's such a vulnerable place to be. And so when people go to shows and they like yell stuff out, or they're drunk and they're heckling, it's like, you don't realize how vulnerable that person is on stage. And the only reason they're there is to just make you laugh. That's the only reason they've come. They're not there to go like, I hope these guys suck and I'm just here to yell at them. They're like, they just want you to have a good time and laugh. That's the only reason they're on the stage. So
Good point.
I feel like sometimes people feel like, oh, well, I'm going to pay my money, and not so much at theaters and stuff, but like at a comedy club, you'll often get people who are just drunk and disruptive sometimes and stuff. And I just think about what it's like to be that person up on stage in the crosshairs up there, And I feel like especially for comedians starting out, that's their biggest fear, is like, well, what if I get heckled, and what if somebody yells something out? And it's like, it's kind of sad that they still have that fear, that thing still exists, but it always will, I think, to a certain degree. But it's like, that's all the comedians up there doing, is just trying to give you a good night and have a good time. So I think if more people just realize that in that moment, and maybe they're not the people sitting in the dark going, I better yell stuff out. It's like, nobody's here to see you. Nobody's here to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Just eat your chicken wings, eat your nachos.
Well, that's what I like.
Yeah.
I like when comedians, I mean, I think it's unfortunate they have to do this, but pointing out to some people, sir or ma'am, do you not realize you're at a comedy show? You were here to laugh. So uncross your arms and just open up. And I want to kind of dissect and go through and hopefully hit a little funny bone in you somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, I tell new comedians, I used to do workshops with new comedians, and that was a lot of the fear they would have, is like, well, what if I get heckled? And so I would try and rewire their mind a little bit, where I was like, no one's coming to this show hoping you suck. No one got a babysitter tonight. No one found parking, went for dinner ahead of time, got dressed up, and is coming here hoping you eat it. No one. Everyone's on your side already. You're already +5, because they're here, sitting down, facing the front, quiet. They're already on your side. So you just don't be self-conscious about all the other stuff. Just go and focus on your material and do your stuff to the best of your ability and have fun. And they're already on your side. It's a very different mentality than, what if I suck? What if these jokes aren't good? What if I get heckled? Now you're -5, like you're already in a hole. Like let's start from a point of abundance and go from there. And it tends to work for a lot of people, is to try and just think in a positive way, walking into that situation, that everyone's there for the right reason and they're all on your side. So I think that works.
Trent, I only have a couple of questions for you. Is there any adversity that you have faced, and whether it may help or hinder your career and your comedy career, but you use that as motivation, but you can also use your adversity to help other people who are facing adversity in their work?
It's a great question. I think adversity wise, something that I've learned, and especially in entertainment, and I know it applies to a lot of other people in their lives in general, is that quite often the results you're looking for don't happen in your time. in the timeline that you've set out for yourself as to when this thing should happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the universe cares about when you think it should happen, you know? So we get very frustrated when we feel like we've put in a certain amount of effort over a certain amount of time and we've had it equaling this goal at this time. No one's promised you that, you know? So are you willing to wait longer to achieve this thing you want to achieve? And if you can learn to do that, and that's why it's important to love what you do, because it may take way longer for you to get to the point where you think you're supposed to get to. So that ability to just focus on the everyday little wins of writing a new line for a joke, writing a new 5 minutes, getting on stage this week, all measurable things that I control. I'm not letting someone else control them. I'm not trying to attain something from somebody else or be chosen by somebody else. I set the standards and I use my own metrics. And if you can do that, it's amazing how you just gradually keep moving along and progressing because you're not squeezing so tight, hoping for these outside goals to be chosen by somebody else or selected, or, you know, it's an internal metrics you're using for yourself, and you enjoy that process every day. I think that really, really moves you along. And you also enjoy it way more because you're not living and dying on every success and every failure. You're just enjoying the thing that you make and do every single day. And I think if people can learn to do that, they end up A, being way happier, and B, tend to actually get to where they actually want to go. But you're willing to keep moving your feet because you know that timeline is unpredictable. You never know. And you can also, in entertainment in particular, have a great stretch of a couple of years and all of a sudden the bottom falls out of it, and then you go, you know, career-wise, things change. So can you maintain a level of just continuity mentally to kind of continue to move and continue to create and keep moving? And I think if people can learn to do that, they end up in a really good place.
I'm sure it's been said before, but comedy has probably the most overarching hands into other people's lives, in that if we could look to the comedian on how they struggle, they triumph, the difficulties they go through and all of that, and apply them to our own lives. It's not just, and this is what I appreciate about Joe Rogan's podcast, which I couldn't, at first I was like, man, why are you always having comedians on there? But then I started to realize, like, these are some hardworking individuals that they don't demand respect, but we surely should give it to them. And when we see the work that you in particular go through, like, because you have a bunch of pots in the fire, right? You're a stand-up comedian, you're a writer, you're an actor, you're on a show, right? You have a podcast, and all these relate to one another, but it just shows the determination, the dedication that is required to do this. And then other people who are in other types of jobs can say, listen, you know, I don't need to do that many things, but if I can just take one nugget from what these comedians are doing on a daily basis, or what, you know, on a weekly basis, or however long it looks, then I will be better off in my craft.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, you know, when you talk to comedians in general, a lot of times they've had stuff that's happened in their lives that's been rather traumatic. And I'm sure, you know, a lot of your listeners or viewers, you know, everyone's had stuff in their lives that, you know, has brought them to their knees at some point. And I feel like for all of us, it's how you dance with that, you know, like that can't be an excuse for you not to have the life you want to have. Everyone's got a backpack full of pain that they probably carry around with them, but it's like, how do you carry that? How do you process that? And I think when people realize, okay, that's what happened to you, that's the cards that were dealt to you. You know, one of these adages I've heard people say, you know, when something bad happens, people say, why me? Why would this happen to me? And then the other pushback is, well, why not you?
Why not?
Bad things happen to people all the time. People are born in, you know, these war-torn countries where there's civil war and they're running through the streets while there's bombs going off. That's their pain they have to deal with. You know, so we all get something. So at the end of the day, it's like, well, how are you going to negotiate with it and still go on to try and have the life that you want to have? But it's not an excuse for, well, that's why I didn't achieve these things. It's like, okay, no, you had that, but now how are you going to deal with that and move forward? And I feel like when people figure that out, I really believe this, that I think people either process pain or they pass it on. You either process your pain or you pass it on to somebody else. And I feel like the more people process their pain, the more they'll be able to just achieve the goals they want to achieve, go inside themselves and know that it's the things that you control. That's what makes the difference, you know.
And use that pain positively in their life.
Yeah, as opposed to, I mean, we all know someone who was, going to be the next NHL star or the great athlete out of your hometown or the
Mhm.
person who had all the raw talent to be anything and they just didn't do it and they're full of excuses as to why it didn't happen or whatever. It's like, okay, like you think you're the only person who ever had to go through adversity to try and get through something? Everybody has that. Every single person. It's not a smooth road for anybody that I know who's ever achieved anything or any of their goals. Never was it a smooth road for anybody. So why wouldn't it be tough for you? It's tough for everybody. So I think when people accept that reality, I think it gets a little bit easier to achieve.
Trent, I have one more question besides how can people reach you?
Sure. You can reach me at my website, transcomedy.com. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. I think I'm even on LinkedIn. You can believe that. What am I looking for a job?
Not looking for a job
And
though. Hey, bye. I'm not looking for a job. Pretty happy
not looking for a
here.
job. Don't need it. I'm good. I'm good.
Just my profile
And
picture.
just their profile bit, like here for keynotes. Yeah, so I'm on all those platforms, and you can find me there. And the podcast, the Generators podcast with Trent McClellan, drops a new episode every Tuesday, so you can find that on all the podcast platforms. So, yeah, I'm all over those places.
LinkedIn is a great resource, but how do you explain it to your employer? Uh,
Yeah,
just looking around.
yeah. I'm looking for another sketch comedy show. No, I'm good. I'm good. I just was here
Good.
feeling it out. I didn't know. It's like high five back in the day. I didn't know.
It's a
So
fake account. It's not mine. Someone else
yeah,
put it
yeah.
up
It's
there.
not mine. It's hacked. It was your post. Sorry, I'll delete it. Sorry.
One final question, Trent. Why do you work?
I work because I feel it's my purpose. I feel it's like making people laugh, having good conversations and sharing it with people. I feel like that's what I was meant to do. And I'm lucky that I get paid to do this and have this job. And I feel very, very privileged and honored to do it. But I work because it makes me feel closer to my authentic self and helps me get in touch with who that person is and the authentic me in there. So I feel when I do those things, that's how I feel centered and grounded. And when I'm not doing those things, I notice I don't feel quite myself. So that's how I'm always reminded that this is the work I'm supposed to be doing.
Trent McClellan, stand-up comedian, writer, podcaster, actor, and cast member of This Hour Has 22 Minutes. I appreciate your time and I appreciate the work that you do.
Thanks so much, Brian. I appreciate you having me. All the best.
I'm BrianVee. Thank you to Trent McClellan for coming on. You can find him on This Hour Has 22 Minutes, as well as the other places he had just mentioned. Find me on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, any of those podcast hosts. You can like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button below here. If you would like to be a guest or you know someone who would like to be a guest, email me at whywework@brianv@gmail.com. Whywework, BrianVee, VEE, @gmail.com. And it would be an honor. I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work.